So let's talk about what is DeFi. DeFi is decentralized finance. And decentralized finance means a lot of things. It's a lot of different projects that are out there that are based on DeFi, which is basically there to replace a centralized financial institution, right? What would be a centralized financial institution? It would be like Chase Bank, right? Or your local, whatever the local banks are here. So this is a way to have all of your banking, all of your financial applications done independently of a central location, which also means for our application means not having to follow kind of what I would say ridiculous guidelines, right? We've coined a term called DCOM, decentralized common sense. I'll give you an example of what really inspired us. A couple of years ago, we had a customer that could document he was paying $1,500 a month in rent for the last couple of years. Every month on time, no problems. He wanted to apply for financing to buy a home, putting $100,000 down payment. His new payment with taxes, insurance, everything was going to be rounding up about $1,350, saving about $150 a month. Makes sense, right? But based upon current Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae guidelines that we all have to follow, because it's what we do right now is centralized finance, he got denied because his debt to income ratio was 62%. But as a landlord, would you accept that person as a tenant? Well, of course you would. Why wouldn't you? That's what we mean by decentralized common sense. We want to remove the central decision making, which is made for the protection of financial institutions, to use common sense in making decisions. Use factors other than these guidelines that they use to sell and trade, secured assets, secured bonds, and things like that, right? Let's take some common sense into the decisions that we make on whether or not we can get people approved for financing. This is a process that would be called decentralized finance, right? And furthermore, with our project, which is basically ethical finance, there is what's called governance. So we have an automated process that goes through and looks at an application and divides into 7 different qualifications. Okay, you're qualified for this, you're qualified for this. The 7th category is governance. And governance means that everybody that holds the ethical token can vote. We put the criteria, no identifying information, just the criteria. And people say, yes or no, this is a good person to finance, right? If we gave you that criteria, $100,000 down, 2 years, $1,500 a month, new payment $1,350, yes or no, vote. You would vote yes, because it doesn't maybe meet the other criteria, okay? This is called governance. So what we're trying to do is to make everything decentralized, where nothing is dependent upon what these institutions are saying makes a valid a lending transaction. Okay, so 2 things to remember. 1, ethical token will help decentralize the Islamic finance process or any finance process, and 2, will leave governance or decision making to the people that are part of the system, the ecosystem, right? Because this is a token, this is not a coin. And so ethical token, which is available right now, it's in pre-sale, is something that we would be able to use the funding from the sale of this token to be able to finance real estate transactions using the Islamic structure of rent to own. Then there is a second token, the Ijara token. The Ijara token, for lack of a better word, represents your equity that you're building up. Okay? It's technically not equity. because you are actually earning these tokens every time you make a payment. When we get into how our profit's made, we have to talk about what is staking. Think about staking as opening a CD, right? You put your money into a CD at the bank, they give you a return. But from a Sharia perspective, CDs are not halal because basically it's interest. But if you had something that was profit sharing, if you had a profit sharing account and you were earning profits by tying up your money, but you're earning profits, okay, that's acceptable. Staking depends on how the return is being generated to you. So whenever you look at these staking opportunities that are out there, some of them have pretty good returns, but you need to know, how are they earning that profit? And if they're earning that profit through a profit share, well then of course that's acceptable. Now we are going to be creating different staking pools so people can invest in different things. And one of the things would be like ETHi Health. You could invest in health type of transactions. You could also invest in like retirement homes, things like that, okay? So you could earn your return from that. But we also have what's called ETHi Philanthropy. And ETHi Philanthropy is designed to help our nonprofits that are struggling sometimes. I mean, how many people want to keep donating, but they can't donate anymore, right? You donate as much as you can. You reach what I call donor fatigue. Not that you're tired of donating, but you can only donate so much. But institutions need more money. So maybe what some people do is they say, okay, well, I have this money, it's for my kids' education or whatever, and I don't need it for a few years, so I'll give it to you as a Qard al-Hasan. We all know what that is, right? And that's great. But then what happens if all of a sudden you need to access those funds? Then the institution is scrambling to raise more money to try and pay you back. Well, with ETHi Philanthropy, which is a staking pool, you can take your investment and you can put it to a nonprofit that we have on our staking pool. Would be say, okay, here is my investment. I'm going to take whatever the increase in value is, but you can take whatever the income is. So all of the income gets donated to that nonprofit, but anytime you need to access your money, you just sell your tokens. Does that make sense? So you can support your nonprofit, but you also have access to your money anytime you need it. It's a flexible endowment. That's what ETHi Philanthropy is. We've got a pool that we've been talking to UNHCR about creating a pool for refugees. So people could invest, stake their tokens. The profits would be donated to UNHCR. And anytime you needed your funds, you could pull it out and sell. Makes sense, right? Rather than doing a Qard al-Hasan where you're tied up, you don't know when you'll get paid back, which is great, but sometimes you might need it. We had an institution recently, nonprofit from California, they had received like $1 million Qard al-Hasan. The brother that effectively loaned them that money said, after like 3 years, hey, I need my funds, I've got an emergency. So they came to us for financing because they had no other way of raising that money. Here, he would have just been able to sell his tokens. Okay, we also have a proposal with the American Senegalese Association, which is also a nonprofit. And we're also accepting other qualified nonprofits to apply for us to be able to set up a staking pool for them. Okay, so this is one of the options that we have in staking. We also have other options, like I said, with ETHi Health, where you can invest in certain healthcare facilities and so on. So the profits are all based upon profit share. They're not based upon any kind of a riba. But at the same time, you have the flexibility. If, for example, you had invested in and you were a partner in a building and you needed to get your money, what would you have to do? Your partners would have to buy you out, or you would have to sell the building, right? It's a long process. Here you can participate and still have the liquidity that you need anytime that you might have an emergency. Make sense? So that's a staking pool. So question is, well, why should I hold ethical tokens? Well, first of all, there's potential growth. Now, we've been issuing tokens at a penny during our pre-sale. And recently, somebody bought tokens from us and sold them for 1.87 cents on Sushi Swap. They made an 87% gain. Now, we're not wanting people, I mean, we know what that address is. We would no longer be selling tokens to that address at a penny, of course. We're wanting people to buy tokens and hold it for at least 12 months because we want to have a really strong public offering, right? We're not interested in, if people want to buy, they can buy it on the open market. They can go Sushi Swap and pay a penny 87 for it, or on an overseas exchange it's sold for 1.607. So you can do that and buy it that way if you're wanting to trade it right away. But if you're willing to hold it for 12 months, then you can buy it directly from us for a penny, and you can save on the gas fees because you're trading with us directly, and we'll walk through that at some point. Secondly, you have the power to decide through governance, right? We talked about governance a little bit. When you are an ETHi token holder, you can participate in the decision-making of what the project is going to do. You are an active participant. It's not like in the stock market where, you know, you have, you own some stock, but, you know, the only vote you really have is to appoint, you know, a board seat or something like that. You're not really voting on the direction or specifics of the project. Here you have a direct governance in the project. You are involved in all the decision making. Well, not all the decision making, there's some that's automated, but specific types of decisions you can be involved in. If we're going to take the project in a completely different direction, or if we're going to add something, that's something that you can vote on, okay? And secondly, we will have some control over the supply, because there is a process of burning tokens that we can be involved in, but we also have a process where we can create more tokens to increase supply. So we can try and hold the value of the token from declining by burning tokens. When you burn supply, and again, this may be, you know, too complicated, but there's a mechanism by which you can control the supply by reducing or expanding it, to be able to help maintain the value and also be able to raise more capital. So if anybody has more interest in how that works, I'm happy to have that conversation offline, because it is more complicated and I think this is confusing enough, right? Now, let's talk about the benefits for the Ijara token holders. Now remember, Ijara tokens are not available for sale right now. They can only be earned. When you make your monthly rent payment, you earn Ijara tokens. And then that will create eventually the future market for Ijara token holders, okay? So one of the ideas behind having this Ijara token is being able to give whoever the prospective rent-to-own tenant is the ability to have a way to access their equity. It's not really equity, but the way, are we all familiar with what a HELOC is? A home equity line of credit? Are we familiar with that? It's basically a line of credit that's tied to your house, right? So when you apply for a HELOC, right, there's qualifications. You have to make a full application. You got a lot of documents to do. You got to get appraisal that has to get done. There's a lot of steps to go through, and it's usually very limited. Here, the tenant has Ijara tokens that they're accumulating every month, and they can sell them anytime that they want to, and then they can buy them back. Because there's a separate market for Ijara tokens. And the fact that they can only be earned is what gives them, we hope, the value. Because they're not just created to raise capital, they're earned by when people are making their rent payments. And potentially, this Ijara token could go up in value. If somebody lives overseas in Australia or Europe or Middle East and they want to invest in US real estate, what do they have to do? They got to do 35% down, they got to have certain types of visas, they got to have tax IDs. Here, all they would have to do is buy the Ijara token and they've instantly got equity, effectively equity, in US real estate. It's technically not equity, but it's the earned tokens that the tenant is receiving for making their rent payments on time that they can trade. And we think it'll have some future value because it will allow people that are overseas to participate effectively in US real estate. And we are intending for the Ijara token, again, it's not a coin, it's a token. The ecosystem would include things like Hajj or Umrah or a solar panel kit, or people can trade, they can save up their Ijara tokens and then they can trade them. Just much like a point system. Everybody know how a point system works, like you accumulate, with your credit cards or whatever, you get points. And then you can trade those points for something. Well, what if you could trade those points for Hajj or Umrah? Alhamdulillah, a lot of us are fortunate enough to have performed Hajj or Umrah. But there's a very large part of our community that struggles every month just to make their rent payment, right? Struggles every month to put food on their table. What hope do they have of being able to accumulate enough money for Hajj or Umrah? It's going to be a big struggle for them. But here, just by making their rent payment on time, they're accumulating these tokens, these points, that they can, inshallah, eventually trade for Hajj or Umrah. So by participating in this project, inshallah, we will all earn some ajr for being able to facilitate somebody that's less fortunate than us at some point down the line, maybe being able to perform a Hajj or Umrah. Or what happens if they need to all of a sudden college education for their kids? Just by making their rent payment, they can accumulate Ijara tokens. When time comes that they need the money, they can just sell those tokens, pay for that education. Or what happens if the transmission falls out of their car, right? Now they got to fix their transmission. Where are they going to get that extra money? Well, maybe they can sell their Ijara tokens. Who knows what the value is, but maybe they have enough that it could help them with that kind of thing, right? So there's a lot of applications whereby somebody could be benefiting from earning this Ijara token simply by being, a rent-to-own tenant in one of these transactions. So why buy a pre-sale? Well, obviously, there's a benefit to buying something, at a penny when perhaps it's going to trade for a penny 87. I think it's personally within 18 months of going really public, it's going to be probably 75 cents. And why do I think that? Well, let's take a look at some other projects. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with these, but you could, obviously, all crypto is basically down right now, but there is, still good opportunities there. ETHi, for example, right now today, I think it's trading at 89. I think the price for ETHi is 89 today. It was at 318 in October, but it's still much more, double what it was when it came out. Maker also went up significantly. And then YFI had a major gain. It went up to 378. It's now obviously trading for much less than that, but these are the kinds of gains that people have heard of in crypto. And they're still possible because, for example, even though the Aave price has fallen, the project still makes sense, right? It's the same thing, with some of these others. It's the project that really matters, okay? And so what the future is going to be, we don't know, but you can research all of this online. I don't want to go through, what the prospects are for crypto in general, but it's the drop in price today is basically because there were very large institutions that were leveraging on a very extreme basis their Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other tokens. And what do I mean by leveraging? Well, staking is one thing, right? Where you can effectively go ahead and, loan your tokens out, if you will. And then on the other side, people can borrow tokens. So there were some large institutions that were, for example, buying $1 million worth of Bitcoin and leveraging it to buy $4 million worth of Bitcoin, thinking that they'll make $100 million in profit. But when, there's an adjustment in, oil prices or whatever else, and Bitcoin drops in value, smart contracts automatically execute, and now they've got these big calls that they have to make, right? I mean, this is what happens basically in option trading. This is why it's not really permissible, because this is a very risky thing. So the drop in the market today is really caused by these greedy, bad institutional actors that were trying to leverage for huge profits. But the projects are what you have to look at, and they're still stable, right? So it's a great time to get involved. Whether you buy ethical token or not, I believe it's still a great time to buy Ethereum and Bitcoin. And the Aave, for example, is also a good token to purchase because the projects are strong projects. So how do you buy ETHi and save on gas fees? Gas fees are basically what it costs you to trade from one currency to another, or to send. Primarily to send, right? It takes, if you need to go somewhere in your car, you put gas in your car and you drive somewhere and drop something off. Here it's the same thing. When you send tokens, there's a gas fee. So gas fees you can save by trading with us directly, okay? And you do that simply by sending Ethereum to an address. And we can walk everybody through how this works, okay? And then whatever Ethereum wallet you have, like MetaMask, which is what we suggest, we send your tokens directly there, okay? Now, how do you buy a house using ethical finance, right? So it works much the same way that our rent-to-own model works right now. Basically, we create a trust. The trust will own the property. Then you will have a rent-to-own transaction, a lease. Each month you make a rent payment to the trust. The trust will then take some of that money and pay a profit share to the ETHi stakeholders. The trust will then pay the cost of ownership, the taxes and insurance, and will also issue the tenant Ijara tokens as a reward. And when the tenant accumulates enough Ijara tokens, they could trade them for the property title, or they could use them for some other function, or they could trade them freely in the market. So here the ethical token holders will be earning a profit if they stake their tokens based upon the rental income, which is halal, right? And they may have some accumulation in value as well based upon what happens in the markets. So once you accumulate enough Ijara tokens, you can trade them for the title of the property, you can trade them for Hajj or Umrah, or a solar panel system, a kitchen remodel, for example. You can also, the ecosystem for ETHi tokens would be to do something like you could trade them for Airbnb type, right? So if you have somebody that's got an Airbnb and they want to rent it out, maybe they'll accept ethical token or Ijara token as payment. That's one of the concepts that we have that we intend to develop. It's not developed yet, but we, inshallah, will develop it.